Thank you, Trish. I want to present a little bit on the project history and importance of the Kihciy project, Sacred Land, down in the White Mud Nature Preserve. Next slide, please. So a part of this project is to support the journey of reconciliation by applying the TRC calls to action, the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls Call for Justice, and the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples as a foundation for Indigenous framework. Next slide, yeah, thank you. So kihciy, or Sacred Land, as we say in Cree, is a joint initiative between the Indigenous Knowledge and Wisdom Center and the City of Edmonton. And a very core part of our relationship is working by and with the spirit of peace, friendship, and respect, which is so much the core of our First Nations and Indigenous relationships with Canada. Kihciy is an urban land area for Indigenous cultural activities within the City of Edmonton and surrounding area, a place where diverse Indigenous cultures can practice essential ceremonies, the transfer of teachings, knowledge, and a place of healing. Kihciy has been guided by a council of elders, 8 elders that we've worked with since 2015. Next. The Indigenous Knowledge and Wisdom Center was established to promote studies of Indigenous history, culture, languages, and values. On June 13, 2013, a duly convened meeting of the Assembly of Chiefs, the Chiefs Resolution, which was number 2013, June 12th, R10, was passed in support of IKWC. In 2016, a Chiefs Roundtable was held in Kananaskis, Alberta. The chiefs agreed to proceed to create a federally incorporated not-for-profit entity and appoint an interim IKWC board of directors. The IKWC office opened its doors and began operations in the spring of 2017, where it was to be a centralized location offering education, policy, language, and culture. It will provide a repository of information on Treaty Number 6, Treaty Number 7, and Treaty Number 8 members, and a First Nations directive environment to learn and share more information. So kihciy is a vision that was created back in 2006, and it's a place that we always seen as an accessible place where urban Indigenous youth and families can access cultural resources near the heart of the city, a place where Edmontonians can learn about the traditions and history of Indigenous people, a place to reestablish relationship and connection to ceremony and land within the city, guided by Indigenous elders and knowledge keepers, a location to provide a natural space for land-based education and special gatherings, the first urban Indigenous ceremonial grounds in Canada, which we're all proud of, with a hope that it inspires other cities to do the same. And so far, we've been receiving great feedback from other cities who wish to do the same thing. So kihciy is located, the official address, if you want to put it on your GPS, is 14141 Fox Drive. And that is close to the North Saskatchewan River, and it's on the east side of the White Mud Creek, at the very north side of the White Mud Nature Preserve. Next. So kihciy in this overview shows the actual land location and the site of where kihciy is. Right now, it's about 7 acres of land in total, or 3.5 hectares. And it's a space that is conducive to many ceremonies and activities that the Indigenous community hopes to engage in. Next. So the reason why this site was chosen is what we've known as Indigenous people for a very long time. And before Europeans had come here, before the settlers had settler farmlands in the area, kihciy was a site that was used for centuries by Indigenous people. The land was used for foraging and also gathering of medicines and healing locations. The ochre and which is to the west of the kihciy site, is used in spiritual and traditional ceremonies. As well, due to the significant history of the location, the site was chosen for kihciy because of its long connection to Indigenous oral history, the places where we gathered, and the places where we did ceremony. Next. So kihciy is an idea, a concept that was born over 15 years ago, and it was a simple vision, one of which that Indigenous people can access culture. Right now, as it stands, the Indigenous people are the only people who have to leave the town in order to perform their ceremonies. We don't have a temple, a mosque, or a cathedral to do our ceremonies, but kihciy is our cathedral, our mosque, and our temple. And it's a place where we want to continue to make accessible our culture, our ceremonies to Indigenous generations and the Indigenous communities that live here in Edmonton. And it's important for us to recognize that the site is a place where future generations can gain that knowledge, become stronger in who they are. When Indigenous people are connected to the cultural and spiritual tradition, they simply do a lot better. It helps identity formation, it reinforces cultural tradition, and makes the individual and the community a lot more strong. This site will help build bridges with people who are not Indigenous and break down barriers that are created by a lack of knowledge. Next.
Thank you, Louis. So I'll be going over now the project timeline, engagement, and consultation. So next slide, please. So to assist with clarifying the background of the project, a few of the major milestones I'll be going through for the next few slides that details some of the key and important, again, milestones of the project. So from way back in 1968, the city first acquired the former Fox Farm site. Back in 2003, the Whitemud Integrated Area Concept Plan is developed and was approved by City Council. In 2006, the city received a proposal from the Indigenous Elders Cultural Resource Society to create a permanent site for Indigenous cultural events and learning experiences for both Indigenous and non-Indigenous people. And in 2009, the Whitemud Integrated Area Concept Plan was amended to include the development of the cultural site, which was called kihciy, and a public open house was held back in 2009. So City Council in 2011 approved funding in the 2015-2018 budget cycle for kihciy Phase 1. Next slide. So as we progress through the timeline, in 2015 and 2017, Indigenous consultation, design, and environmental reviews occurred. And in 2018, Council approved the environmental impact assessment and site location study, which we'll get more into in the next few slides. In 2019, with direction from Council, the Indigenous Relations Office worked with the Indigenous community partners to identify potential partners that could finalize and implement a governance and operations model. And as we progress in recent years, in 2020, the city began working with the Indigenous Knowledge and Wisdom Center, and the City Council approved the release of capital funding. And as we progressed into last year, the city re-engaged the prime consultant to update the drawings to current code and COE standards. So the design didn't change much, but what occurred was more of the internal workings to ensure everything met code and standards. Next slide. And as we progressed into the latter half of last year, Delnor was selected as a construction manager for the project. In September 2020, September 22nd of 2021, a ground blessing ceremony was held, and we formally began construction in November of 2021. And as we progress into 2020, construction will be ongoing, and we're anticipating a grand opening to occur in Q1 2023, which falls within that winter of 2022 timelines as per the website. Next slide. So now speaking a little bit on the public engagement aspect. So a draft concept, and this is again some of the background, a draft concept plan for the Whitemud integrated area was presented to the general public at open houses in June 2000 and June 2002. The plan was amended in 2009 to include the development of the kihciy site for Indigenous cultural programs and ceremonies. An additional consultation was occurred in spring of 2009 with stakeholder focus groups, Indigenous community, and again, a public open house. Some of the feedback we received back in 2009 was that the majority of the public would like the site to remain as natural and sustainable as possible, while also supporting the need for Indigenous cultural site at kihciy, which included cross-cultural learning opportunities. Those who opposed the project or had concerns had concerns on the noise, hours of use, future expansion, and environmental impacts. The specific environmental concerns focus primarily on the potential impacts to wildlife and the environments. So the environment impact mitigation strategies were addressed in the environmental impact assessment, which I'll go through in a couple slides. Next slide, please. So a project-specific website has been maintained throughout the project. A stewardship committee was also established among the park area users and facilities to ensure communication and coordination with the Whitemud Park space. So this committee continues to meet regularly. And the City of Edmonton Neighborhood Resource Coordinators, who were previously known as the Community Recreation Coordinators, have been members of the Stewardship Committee since its inception in 2012. So during the design phase, the Neighborhood Resource Coordinators had ward meetings with the city and the Indigenous Relations Office and attended and provided project updates. So a little bit in terms of the next slide, please. So a little bit on the EIA, the Environmental Impact Assessment. It examined impacts around the proposed site. And so the report outlines various mitigation measures for impacts related to geotech and soils, hydrology, and surface water quality, vegetation, wildlife, habitat connectivity, residential and recreational land use, traffic and parking, historic resources. So really, from the 2009 concerns, this report addresses a lot of those questions and comments. So not to go through each and every single one of some of the mitigation measures that were included in the report, but a few of them of note are ensuring that the city follow this, ensuring that the project follow the City of Edmonton erosion and sedimentation control guidelines, develop an eco plan and implementing best environmental construction practices, replacing lost and damaged trees, and that was in accordance with our corporate tree management policy, and limiting construction hours, working hours as per bylaw 1460-100. And so there's more details here provided. Next slide, and I'll hand it over to Morgan.
Thank you. One of the important aspects of designing and creating kihciy was Indigenous participation in design and shaping the program of the site, as well as the look and feel. To this end, the city worked previously with Native Counseling Services of Alberta, and now currently with the Indigenous Knowledge and Wisdom Center, to ensure that there was good community engagement and participation from Indigenous peoples living in and around Edmonton. Through a variety of different gatherings and meetings, this feedback was obtained. A Grand Council gathering was held at the site in May of 2015, where spiritual leaders from the Edmonton region and Indigenous communities surrounding Edmonton were invited to attend, following Indigenous protocols, to help shape the program and the look and feel of the site. Further gatherings of elders were held in the subsequent years, including in 2015 and 2016, to help provide additional feedback on the design. And the design work that was undertaken with the city and the architect was informed by an elders council. Go to the next slide. You heard a little bit earlier about the elders council and its role in the work of kihciy to help ensure the spiritual guidance and direction of the project was aligned with the original intention. Native Counseling Services of Alberta, our previous partner, and the Indigenous Knowledge and Wisdom Center, our current partner, at first established and maintained, respectively, the Elders Council. The Elders Council is a group of about 8 elders whose names are on the screen. I won't read them, but who convene regularly to provide spiritual wisdom for the development of the site and to ensure that it reflects its original intention. And we continue to meet with this group regularly to ensure that this original vision for the site is maintained.
Thank you, Morgan. This is Richard Isaac from Reimagine Architects. When we first started this project in 2015, we were called Manask Isaac at that time. Next slide, please. So in 2015, at the end, in the winter, we had sessions with elders and Indigenous people in Edmonton to establish a vision. And this is a list of some of the parts of that: being a welcoming to general public while being a sacred space for spiritual celebration, a place for healing and reconciliation, also a place to share the world's view of Indigenous people, to respect and work with existing land and the creek, and a successful integration of fire. Next, please. Also important was accessibility for people wishing to visit the site. So there's vehicular access off Fox Creek, which is the red line. And next to that is a purple line, because we also had to have good access for emergency vehicles in the event of something happening on the site. The yellow indicates pedestrian and bicycle access. So this right down directly south from Fox Drive or from the Savage Center across the creek. And also transit. So transit is a bus stop on Fox Drive, which enable people who need to use public transport to gain access to the site. Next, please. So this is an overview of the site and the phases that are being constructed right now. So on the left-hand side is the access road, which with the red cloud symbol is being widened to allow access for emergency vehicles. Present, it's a little too narrow for that, which then leads into a car park with 50 cars, a turnaround for buses, and then also a bus car park. So there's a parking space for 2 buses. Just north of that circular is the actual buildings, the 2 buildings, which we'll see in a bit more detail later. And to the right, cut into the grass, are the 2 circles. To the north is the teepee circle, and to the south is a circle for sweat lodges, in the center of which you can see the, I don't know how many we'll end up with, but at the moment that shows 4. Next, please. So also important is that we don't cause any fires. So we worked with the Edmonton Fire and the Fire Smart people to make sure that we had sufficient distances from any shrubbery and so on where the fires would take place. We need a fire to heat the rocks for the sweat lodges and various other activities. So we provided good distance for such fires to be placed. Next. The building part is made up of 2 distinct pavilions. One is the actual pavilion itself, which contains washrooms and change rooms for people who are about to enter the sweat lodges, and also a gathering space, which is big enough to accommodate, I think, 25 to 30 people. And separate, so that building is heated and insulated. Separate from that, the cold storage building, which will not be heated. That's where the utility vehicles and lawnmowers and the teepee coal poles and teepee canvases and firewood will be stored. Next, please. So this is nobody will see this because this is a view taken from the air with the roof taken off. So on the left-hand axonometric view shows in the foreground the pavilion, which has the gathering space and the change rooms and washrooms in it. And beyond that is the cold storage room, which has the storage facilities, and built up against it is a sloping grassed area, which acts as an amphitheater so that outdoor events can be held there. Next, please. And the overall finish of the buildings would be a grey siding with metal paneling. There is some copper siding on it and asphalt shingles, which will be largely covered with photovoltaic panels. And the overall buildings are low impact, respectful to the bucolic setting. And we use the image of simple buildings that you find in Alberta. Mostly would be the barns one finds associated with the farms. Next, please.
Thank you, Richard. So the next slide now, we'll discuss the project schedule status. Next slide. So construction started back in 2021. And as we progress into this year, we are currently actually working on the foundational work, and the structures are beginning to be erected. As we continue on to the latter half of this year, specifically in Q3 and Q4, the interior finishing, site works, and some final landscaping will be completed. Again, we're forecasting a completion date sometime in winter of 2022 with an in-service date looking into Q1, Q2 of 2023. And sorry, Louis, you're up next.
Thank you, Navdeep. Next slide, please. Yeah, kihciy will be a site that is based in a natural setting for hosting ceremonies and traditional arts and sciences and the facilitation of intergenerational and land-based teachings. The site itself will be open daily from 9 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. and will adhere to the City of Edmonton Noise Bylaw 14600. There will be a private security company providing after-hour and nighttime monitoring of the site and direct connection with City Park Rangers and the City of Edmonton Police as well. It's intended to be a solemn site, and that's really important for us. The site is not meant to be a site of grand celebrations, but it's a site for us to pray and for us to come together in those solemn moments of ceremony and gathering. Events such as powwows will not be held there, and partner groups will make efforts to reach out and engage the neighborhood and surrounding communities as well, so that we can connect with the neighboring communities and provide some programming that each community may want to engage with kihciy. Next slide, please. The Indigenous Knowledge and Wisdom Center is responsible for the management and the operations and the direction of the people working, using, and volunteering at the kihciy site. Designated staff members, such as myself, will be assigned to the IKWC kihciy operations team and will work directly with the kihciy Council of Elders. The City of Edmonton will be providing facility maintenance support for the project, and the IKWC will be responsible for operational supports. Next slide, please. So a part of the description of some of the ceremonies that we'll be having, for example, here we have the sweat lodge. The sweat lodge ceremonies will be arranged around a central permanent fireplace for heating of stones involved in the ceremony. Required supplies and space for their storage will include sufficient firewood, fuel stones, fresh water, canvas tarps, blankets, and tools for preparing ceremonial fires and the handling of heating stones. The lodges will be constructed of willow branches covered with tarps, and the stone heating devices in the fires themselves will not exceed more than 3 to 4 feet in diameter. So it's a very small fire and intended just to heat stones and to burn nothing else. Pipe ceremonies, though, are a foundational aspect of many of Indigenous ceremonies and gatherings and teachings. As such, the pipe ceremonies will be expected to take place in all spaces within the kihciy site and the gathering room and the educational space and the sweat lodges, the teepees, the amphitheater, and outdoor educational space as well. Next slide, please. So within the traditional teachings, what's important for the Indigenous community in Edmonton is reconnecting with land and introducing those concepts to Indigenous youth. So land-based educational programming and traditional teachings will be a central activity on the kihciy site. These activities will take place in the teepees, amphitheater, and outdoor educational space, as well as the indoor meeting and educational space. Some of the programming, though, may include accessing the Wetnut Creek, North Saskatchewan River, and or the trail system within the program park. And these are all determined basically on what type of programming an organization may lend itself to the kihciy site. As a part of our traditions and the foundations of many of our traditions is the smudging ceremony. And so the smudging ceremony is the burning of small amounts of traditional medicines like sage and tobacco and sweetgrass And it's used for cleansing, and it prepares us as we get into many different gatherings and ceremonies. It's a key function of ceremonies before we start. Next ceremony, next page, please. So the teepee and the outdoor educational space, as identified in the previous slides, the site will include a dedicated area for teepees, which will be used for prayer ceremonies, group educational workshops, and other cultural purposes at the times. It might be used for overnight use, and when we do that, any events or usage exceeding regular park hours, which is 5 a.m. to 11 p.m., as stated by Parkland Bylaw 2202, a special application will be made to the city for any events or usage exceeding regular park hours. Special application to the city will be required. Apart from the sweats in the teepee area, the teepee area will be the most frequently used event site in kihciy. Each teepee can accommodate between 16 to 20 people, with the largest teepee measuring about 22 to 26 feet in diameter, with a teepee pole height of 30 to 36 feet. The teepees will be erected on site and on a need basis. When the event is over, all the teepees will be taken down and stored appropriately. Next slide, please. So a number of events and programming will be made available to the general public and neighboring communities. And it's important for the Indigenous elders, as they have stated, is that we want to reach out and provide educational opportunities about Indigenous worldviews, histories, sciences, and cultural teachings in the spirit of reconciliation. As the elders have led this project, they said that what we need to do is reach out to our brothers and sisters in Edmonton and help them get to know more about our traditions and who we are in that spirit of reconciliation and in that spirit of treaty tradition of peace, respect, and friendship. Thank you. We're building this for the people in Edmonton, for our people and our youth and our families to come to a place where they can pray.
You know, there was a vision of a young man, to get off a transit, to come to a sweat lodge with his towel, and to be able to leave and go back to his home again on the same transit. So I think we're closer and closer to that vision.
Being a nurturer, I worry about a lot of children, my relatives that live in the city that don't have that opportunity. And a great place is here.
I'm glad to be a part of this gathering here where we're actually blessing the land. And as you know, we're always talking about reconciliation. It takes both sides to reconcile and come to understand that we're in this together.
We made very specific commitments as a city and as a council to work to ensure that there were places for Indigenous people to come within the city who didn't have the opportunity to leave.
We are going to offer these to the tree here as an offering to the Creator and Mother Earth to guide us and bless us as we continue to build this project.
I want to see kihciy move in the direction to educate the non-Indigenous people.
There's a sense of pride as an Edmontonian that we have this here in the midst of our city in this beautiful space.
But it's not often a project like this comes across your desk. We'll not find another project like this that will be matched with the same purpose and same impact that I think this project will have.
As a Métis family in the city, struggling against trauma and oppression, and as a 15-year-old, these things were not accessible to us in this way. And so now seeing it, this is a really full circle moment for myself and my family.